continuation of a lesson that was called How to Create a Sheer Skirt Dress in Adobe Illustrator. This is part 2 of the lesson, where we're actually going to create a sheer fabric across the bottom of the skirt that we just did the CAD for. So again, just talking about sheer fabrics. Sheer fabrics are see-through, like you can see here on this dress. You can see her leg. You can even see part of the little skirt that belongs to the top part of the dress peeking through. Because the fabric's sheer, you can see through it. So that's the look that we're going to create down here in the bottom part of the skirt section of the dress. So we're going to get started. Let me just move over to where I have that lesson. So here's our sheer skirt tutorial. And basically we're going to use a couple different tools. We're going to use the gradient tool to create this sheer look. We're also going to use something called drop shadow effects that are going to create little cool effects that happen across the actual fabric motion lines that you see through here. So in this area, we are going to start off by taking our skirt CAD that we already drew with our little wavy hem at the bottom. We're going to take that skirt, click on it with the black arrow, we're going to fill it with gradient. So there's a gradient chip right here in between the no fill color box right here. Right next door to that is what's called the gradient chip. So make sure your fill box is on top. You have a black stroke outline right here in your skirt CAD, and just click on that chip in the fill box, and now you will see your skirt has a black stroke outline around it and a gradient fill inside of it. Do the same thing with the waistband. The waistband, remember, we drew it as a separate piece. Add the gradient in that as well, and again, it always appears in your fill box. So the next step that we're going to do to create a really interesting wavy look, and you can see here on the finished CAD, because we did this like wavy hem. Oh, a little piece moves over there. Okay. Because we did this little wavy hem design, these fabric motion lines are going to be added later, but you can also see the gradient has some light that looks like it's hitting a little brighter in some parts, some parts of the fabric that is a little bit darker. And that's all created with the gradient tool, but there's some modifications that we do with the gradient tool to make the fabric not only look sheer and see-through like this, but also creates fabric movement, like indicating shadows and where light hits it. So you can see the difference between the skirt here that I did, where I just clicked on it and put a gradient in it. That's all I did. Now you can see side by side, this skirt here has some waviness in it, some motion happening. It looks a little bit more dimensional in here. So to get that look, we're going to use the gradient tool, but we're going to adjust the gradient colors from different shades of gray and black to get this kind of movement. Basically, it looks like it's rounded like this. Kind of looks like that wavy motion we did with the bottom hem. So in order to do that, you're going to take your gradient skirt, and let me just make a copy because I don't want to lose my original for my tutorial. Make a copy. For me, I have to make a copy, but you're going to use your original. And I'm going to go to Window Gradient. So every time you fill something with a gradient, Window Gradient has its own box with tools inside of it where you can adjust the gradient. So let's actually take a look real quick at what I did over here as a lesson. So you can see my gradient box for the one that we're going to create this wavy look. This is called the gradient slider bar, this whole bar going across. And in here you can see different little circles going across the bottom. You see these little diagonal diamonds at the top? Those just indicate where the circles are, but really I want you to focus on where the circles are what you're going to add. So the circles are just where color appears. So you can see there's a white circle, then it moves into some grays, some black circles, back into some grays, some black, then gray again, then black. So these circles are different colors. They might even have different opacity. So opacity, basically at 100%, the color is true and very matte. At anything less than 100% opacity, the fabric becomes more see-through. So that's where another way you create sheer fabrics is through the opacity tool in tangent with the gradient. So what we're gonna do on this skirt that doesn't have that wavy effect is we're gonna add little circles, and we're gonna drop in different colors of gray and black with different levels of opacity. And we're gonna watch what happens in our skirt, and we're gonna modify as we go along until we get an effect that we like that again has a light to dark, wavy motion, like what I'm just doing with my cursor right here. That's the intention you want. That's the look we want. So take your white arrow, select your gradient filled skirt, and you see your gradient here. Go to window gradient so we can get that toolbar open, because that's where we're going to work in for the next few minutes. Here's our gradient slider, and every time you fill in with gradient, all the gradient slider ever has is a white circle and a black circle with a little diamond in the middle to indicate the midway point between white and black will be shades of gray. That's what a gradient is. Gradient is just shades of a color from darkest to light. So we are going to add a few circles in here. So I'm going to just take a note of what's I added, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I added like 12 additional circles in between these two. So we may or may not do that again the same way. We'll see. But we're probably going to add a bunch. So go back to gradient tool, and then I'm going to just add some, I'm going to add 12 just to start. So all you do to add these little circles is you click down here. You got to get a little positioning. You got to click down at the bottom on the line, and you just add a few circles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's just see what happens when I add 8, just to get the lesson started. You might have to add more. So basically just add a few different circles here. You're probably gonna have to have at least 8 to maybe 12 total, I guess, to get to the best effect. But I have 8 here, and 9, 10 are the end points. So I have 10 total. And what I'm going to do to create this look, so we're going to watch in live time what happens to our skirt. So make sure your gradient toolbar is next to your skirt. You don't want it over top of it. You want to actually watch what happens as you manipulate these gradient colors. So double click on the gradient circle, and you can see this little scroll bar here, the gradient scroll bar that's only in the shades of gray. Don't mess with the colored ones, just the shades of gray. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start manipulating each. Now watch what happens. See what I just did there? Just by moving that adjustment here on the slider, I got this like now more dimensional line that appeared. So now I'm going to move over to the next gradient, and I'm going to see what happens when I do that. And you're just going to start playing, you know, with that. See, I even got an even darker shadow. I'm going to go to the next one, and I'm just going to start playing with what happens every time I change the color of one of these gradient lines. So I'm just going to play with a bunch of different variations. I might even just slide across the bar just to see. I kind of like that I have a little bit of a darker gradient coming through here, so I'm going to leave that. Go to the next one and just start to create shadow effects. Go to the next one. Really watch in tandem what it's actually doing to your skirt design. Now this one, I might go lighter. So now I'm actually going to move the gradient toolbar over again, because I want to make sure I see that this side of the skirt, how that's being impacted. You can even move it lighter on some of the ones that are darker in the circle. And I might go lighter again over here, and see how there's some dimension starting to happen. I can even take the endpoint one. I don't need to have it be black. I can lighten it up there as well by going on the lighter side. Same thing with the white one. So you can see the white is over here. I can start to shade of gray and make it darker over here. And you can start to see that I'm getting a little bit of a wavy motion happening in here. So I might need to add 1 or 2 more gradient circles to get the look that I want. Because you can see what I just added there. That kind of created a little bit of a wave effect now. By adding that extra circle in there. So maybe I'll add 1 more in here, double click on it, and I'll go in and just start to watch what each circle does to my design. And you can start to see some ripple kind of wavy effects happen. I might add another one there. You're going to really just have to play with it and just start to see what each one does. But I think that's already starting to look pretty good. I might darken this one here at the end. Double click. Yeah, just give a little added dimension there. Might even go back to this one. and add a little slight. What you don't want is really hot, super high contrast stuff like that. So that's good for me to show. That's not going to look natural. That's not going to look like a natural shadow like the way if this skirt was in the light, the way that the light would hit these little wavy acts. You want everything to kind of appear very soft, okay? So you want to make sure you're not doing very stark black lines like that, because that's not going to look very nice. You want to do shades of like pretty much shades of gray all the way across. So then I ended up with probably about 12, 13 circles to get that look. So even then, I want to show you also on the gradient slider. So see how some of these, we need to do side-by-side comparisons. So this one's actually a little bit darker. Don't worry about that. I want you to really focus on this part down here where the wavy hem is. So these, see these like gradients that kind of create like a wavy effect, like right here, just this one right here. If you go all the way down, you can see that this bottom hem is this wide in this area. This little wave is this wide, and the gradient is only this wide. So what I want to do in order to make that wavy gradient fill about the width of this kind of wavy hem at the bottom, I'm going to click on my skirt again with the white arrow. And this is also another thing you can do in the gradient slider, is you can move, you don't have to change the color. You can actually just move the slider, the circles around. And look when I move them, just watch what's happening right in here. If when I move them, see how, oh, that's actually becoming way too computerized looking. But I can move them so that they become wider. So this long vertical kind of gradient wave actually became a lot wider and starts to fill in that area that matches up to how the wavy hem is. So you can just move the sliders along. So make sure your skirt is selected before you start moving things. And, you know, watch when you move certain circles around what they do to the effect of your skirt. Because really you're trying to get those waves to show up where they should in reference to where the hem is wavy. So where the hem is wavy is kind of the wave effect that you want happening around the wave of the hem. Okay, so that's just a general idea. I'm not going to sit here and perfect it, but you get to a good look. What you feel good looks like a wavy kind of three-dimensional effect, has a nice wave that matches similar to what's happening down here. I feel like this side I spent a lot more time on here. It looks a lot better. And then what you can do after that is you can do an opacity a little bit lighter, but we'll do that in a second. Let's actually go to the next part, which is going to be adding fabric motion lines. So you can see my fabric motion lines here, and that creates this effect that we have over here where the skirt is actually is a really big piece of fabric that's being sandwiched into the smaller waist, and it's getting cinched in through here. And what happens is the fabric reacts and it starts doing this little gathering that happens at the waistband. And then what happens is, because the skirt is way fuller at the bottom, when it gets cinched into the waistband, the actual fuller skirt at the bottom also starts to do these long waves of drape that happen. So if you look at any kind of long flowy skirt or dress, you will see these kind of wavy effects happening, not only through the gradient waves, but also through the fabric motion lines. So that's where we're adding these fabric motion lines and these little gathered lines at the waistband. So in order to do that, I'm actually going to use the pen tool. We're going to open up Windows Stroke, and this is just all to add extra dimension to our skirt. Windows Stroke, make sure your full box is extended. And we're going to just draw some stroke lines that are going to come off. I can draw these long ones. And again, it's nice to have your gradient kind of figured out and all done before you add these, because some of these lines might mimic what's happening with the gradient wave. And we're going to take the pen tool and just, for instance, I'm going to draw one long curve line. And it's not as curvy as I'd like because I need to zoom out for a second. I'm going to take it to 0.5 stroke weight. Ooh, my mouse is being funny. Okay, hold on. Okay, so we are going to go back here to look at our stroke line. So this is the stroke line that I just drew with the pen tool, I meant it to be a very curved line, but I need to zoom out. So if you're super zoomed in when you're drawing these fabric motion lines, you might want to zoom out at least this much is what you see here. Because these long continuous curve lines, sometimes if you're zoomed in, they'll zoom off the page when you try and make them curvy. Because remember, they have handles that extend from them. So I'm just going to pull back the handle and make it a little bit more curvier, and then I can zoom in and adjust the curve. So you're basically going to do some curve lines, and I'm going to make them pretty long. They kind of start at the waist and go almost down to the bottom hem, but I'm going to line them up to where the hemline kind of does this wavy detail at the bottom, and draw a few that kind of show that. And again, you can always adjust your curve line slightly. They're very subtle curves, you guys, so don't make them very obvious. So one thing I just want to show you, so if you see my lines here that I drew, they're a little bit thick and thin in some areas. So let me zoom in so you can see that the stroke lines that I drew have a little thin area, then they get thick, then they get thin again, then they get thick. That makes a really nice fabric motion line as opposed to these really straight linear lines I have here. So let's take a look at when I add those lines to my gradient skirt. I'm just going to zoom in so you can see. I'm going to select both of them after I draw them. And you can do this as you're drawing, but since I already drew two, I'm going to show you what happens when I go down to profile and I go to width profile number 2 right here. So you're going to see that my line got thinner, and then it got thick, then it got thin, and it got thick again. So that's actually a nicer look for these fabric motion lines when you use the width profile 2. There's also width profile 4 that you might want to use as well, which this is width profile 2 is a thin to thick to thin to thick line, and width profile 4 is just a thick to thin. So there's certain lines like right here that I'll zoom in that you can see some of the little gathers at the waist. These are actually width profile 4. So you can see they're thicker to start and then they get thin at the bottom. Where these lines right here, the longer ones that I did, are thin to thick to thin again. That's width profile 2. So we're going to mess with drawing a few different fabric motion lines across the body of the skirt. You can see I have a few long ones, about 4 to 5 long ones going from the top of the waistband all the way down to the bottom of the skirt. And I kind of put them in the area you see here, like kind of in the hemline. So let's just take a look what I did. Kind of where the hemline kinds of folds and moves and waves, I have the longer pieces connecting from the waist down to the hem. Then I drew a few fabric motion lines that were a little bit shorter. Looks like I got about 1, 2, 3 coming off. They start at the waistband, but they don't go all the way down to the hem. They kind of go midway, and they're not all the same width. So, I mean, same length. So you want to make them a little bit variance in lengths, again, just to make them look more natural to the way the fabric would fold and react when it's draped. And then I did a bunch of little ones in the middle that are just coming off the waistband. The waist. So this is the waistband. We're going to move that down. But right now, just a couple fabric motion lines right up in here that I do here. So I'm going to take these two off for a second because I just wanted to show you that the window stroke profile, 2 profiles here that you're going to use to do those lines. Make all your fabric motion lines a weight of 0.5, so that's important. Keep that. And then once you have all your lines, you're going to group them. But I have all mine here grouped, and I'm just going to show you when I put them over the body of the skirt so you can use them as reference on where exactly you're going to put these lines in your skirt. So you can see my waistband ones are here. I actually drew the waistband ones, these are little gathers. I drew those with the pencil tool because I was able to do little hooks like this or like stuff like that really easily. So I drew that, and then I just went and changed the profile to profile 4 and made the lines a little thinner at the bottom. But again, I'm going to make those 0.5 stroke weight, or for the fabric gather ones, you could do either 0.5 or 0.75. I think those would look good. And then for the ones down here, the longer ones, I use width profile 2, And I probably did about, well, it changed it. I originally started 0.75 before it became with profile 2. When you use one of these profiles, it changes the weight of your stroke line to a weird number. But start off with 0.75 stroke line and then change it to the profile 2. But that's where you're going to put your fabric motion lines, a few gathers at the top and then a few long ones all the way continuous to the hem. And then maybe 1, 2, 3 that don't line up. They're kind of uneven. 2 at the sides and maybe 1 in the middle of a fabric motion line that meets about part way down. And once you have those fabric motion lines, maybe keep them off the skirt for a second before you add, so that you can add this drop shadow effect. So you can see here the difference between when you drew them just like this. Now you can see there's actually shadow effects that come off of each stroke line. And what that does is just adds, again, another layer of shadowing that helps the gradient kind of give the look of that waviness that we're trying to get in this skirt. So what you're going to do, and this is just the profiles, but I'm going to show you the drop shadow effect. So what you're going to do is you're going to click on one of your lines, one of your fabric motion lines. I actually have them all grouped, so let me ungroup them for a second. I'm going to click on one of my lines, right, with the black arrow, and I'm going to go Effect, Stylize. Where's Stylize? Oh, up here. Stylize, Drop Shadow. Effect, Stylize, Drop Shadow, right here. And you're going to click on that, and this box is going to pop up. And what I want to do, let me just go down here for a second to look at my numbers. So when that box pops up, this is what your box is going to look like. You're going to do an offset of 0.03 inches, Y offset is 0, and then your blur is 0.03 inches. Your preview is checked, your underwear multiply, and you have an opacity of 100, okay? So let me actually just bring that up so I can see it, because I couldn't remember what those numbers were. So let me bring it up here, and I'm going to show you what happens when we click on that. Let's click on our stroke. We're going to go Effect, Stylize, Drop Shadow, and here's the box in live time. This is just my copy. And I'm going to go 100%. I'm going to do my X offset is 0.03. My Y offset 0.03. Oh no, I'm sorry, 0. Y offset is 0. Blur is 0.03. And then I got my preview box checked. So everything matches up. Hit OK. And look what happened. I'm going to move that away for a second. Look what happened. You can see now that that stroke line has a drop shadow effect right here. So you can see it here, even there. So go through all your stroke lines and click on them individually and apply that drop shadow. And the cool thing is once you do it once, I'm pretty sure if I go to Effect, Drop Shadow, yeah, it automatically remembers the numbers. You hit OK, and it'll just keep on adding drop shadow effects to all your CAD. So you don't have to manually type in those numbers again. You just click on the stroke, go Effect, Drop Shadow, because under Effect it'll remember the last thing that you went to, so you don't have to go to Stylize, Drop Shadow. Once you did that, once you typed in your numbers, you just go to Effect, Drop Shadow, and it'll change them all at once for you. Okay, so once you have all your fabric motion lines with these drop shadow effects, now you can do an object group and now bring them over to the body of your skirt. And now you'll do an object group on the skirt itself. Let me get rid of those. Actually, you know what, before you do let's do an object group on all of it. You can bring it all object group. And then I'm going to bring this over here. So this is my grouped skirt with all the fabric motion lines that have the drop shadows. And for this lesson, remember we have our mini dress design. So you have your mini dress that you drew in the part 1 video here. So make sure that is grouped before you bring it over and bring it to your skirt. So let me move this for a second and bring this over here to the new one that I did with you. Oh, don't forget your waistband too, guys. So One thing I will tell you about the waistband is I had you add a gradient really early on in this video. I didn't have you manipulate the gradient at all. So the only manipulation in the gradient to get that wavy effect is going to happen in the body of skirt. Waistband's just going to have the regular gradient without any manipulation. So bring that over and line that up. And actually I'm going to take this dress off for a second because this is the whole skirt that should be grouped, object group. And you're going to bring your dress over to bring it in, to match it up and kind of bring it in where the dress nips in at the waist. You're going to have that part of the dress is where the waistband shows up. And if you can see the skirt showing through, then you've used enough opacity and less than 100% opacity in your gradient. So you're great. If you don't see the skirt, the bottom part of the mini dress showing through the skirt, you are not sheer enough. Now I actually decided to make mine more sheer looking over here, so you can actually make it a little bit more sheer by making sure the gradient is on top on the fill box. Select your skirt, it's grouped, so I would actually select it with the white arrow and hold shift and select the waistband as well. I don't want to select any of the fabric motion lines, that's why I'm using the white arrow, not the black arrow. Go to your opacity tool up here and make, if you don't see it, it means that you don't have window application frame and window control already checked. So if you don't see opacity up there, that's why. So select your skirt with the white arrow and hold shift, select your waistband, go to opacity, and you can start to go to about maybe 80, 85 opacity, and you'll see that the skirt kept that gradient wavy look, kept the drop shadows, all that stuff. It just made it a little bit more of a lighter gray color, which made it a little bit more sheer. So that's going to be the skirt, and we also just need to do a couple little things at the end to finish it. Because the skirt is see-through, at the bottom hem means you're going to actually see the back of the skirt showing through the front. So you're going to have some of the hem from the back of the skirt showing through. So what I do is I actually just take the pencil tool and I draw just a random line that kind of waves a little bit higher than the line that we did here at the bottom hem. And I make sure that that has a no fill color in the fill box and only a black stroke line. So I take the pencil tool, and let me just see, double click on the pencil tool. We're going to go to Fidelity. We're going to move the blue dot to over here to closer to smooth, and we're going to hit OK when we draw this hem. So because the fabric's sheer, like I said, you start to see through it. So you see the back of the skirt hemline through it. So make sure no fill and a black stroke. And then we're going to take the pencil tool and we're just going to start there. I'm going to just draw a wavier hem that starts and ends. Oh wait, actually I don't want to do that smooth. Let's go to the middle, the Fidelity middle, the dot in the middle, and let's see what that looks like. I'm just holding my mouse down. Yeah, that's better. I'm holding my mouse down and I'm just drawing a wavier hem that kind of starts from here and ends here, and I kind of wave up and down, up and down. And the reason why I changed the Fidelity to be in the middle as opposed to smooth is because every time you change, so when you use the pencil tool, if you click on accurate, you're going to have 1,000,000 trillion points on your pencil line, vector points. If you go to smooth, you'll have less vector points, but what it'll do is won't allow you to make as wavy of a look. So what I wanted to do is go in the middle so I can get a wavy look with my pencil tool, and I still have not 1 trillion points. I only have maybe about 8 points here. So that I want to always, the pencil tool can give you 5,000,000 points, and it'll be really hard for you to manipulate things if you don't like it. So I want to try and go somewhere in the middle where if I wanted to make an adjustment with the white arrow, I don't have that many points that I need to adjust. But remember, you always do have the adjustment option with the white arrow. So once I get that wavy hem, and it's a loose piece, you guys, so it's not joined to the skirt. Loose piece, just perfect it with the white arrow if you don't like the way you originally drew it, and then do a copy paste of it, and then we are going to turn it into stitching. So go make sure your window stroke box is open, click on dash line. What do I have here? I have, all right, so that's weird numbers. Let me click on it. Let's do a 2 point dash 1 point gap. And let's make the stroke line 0.5. And then I'm going to put my stroke line above my that hem that I just did. And remember, I need to do stitching down here too. So we're going to do that. And you can either use the pencil tool or the pen tool to do that. Let me see. I'm going to try it with the pencil tool. And I'm just going to try and mimic what I have here already in the hem, because the stitching should just appear right above that bottom hemline. And because I'm still in dash line under stroke, it'll remember what I just did. So if something looks weird, just move the points and see how much more points there is here. It's because I did a very super wavy line, so there's a lot more points I need to manipulate, but not too many because I actually drew it all right the first time. So, and then there's always curve handles too, so remember you can always play with that. But basically you need a stitch line here at the bottom hem. And let me just do a quick adjustment. Let's do 0.25 for the stroke weight. Actually, I think that looks a little bit more delicate for this skirt. So 0.25 for your stroke weight in your top stitching, and then remember you have this loose hem here that's not a part of the dress. So once that's going to complete the dress for the front view, and then remember to do the same thing for the back view. So bring your back view CAD. These are actually already grouped, but your back view dress, let me ungroup it for a second. This was your back view dress, mini skirt dress. Let's bring that. The skirt is the same exact skirt. So once you added that bottom hem, I want you to object group the whole thing. Just the skirt, not the front of the, not the little mini skirt dress, just the skirt. So now the skirt is one full skirt with that hem detail, because that same skirt is going to be copied and pasted over here, and then you're going to add the back mini skirt dress and put it behind it. So again, just make sure you're copying the same skirt so you get the same level of opacity, and it's got all the drop shadows, same bottom hem. And this is what your skirt design is going to look like before we add the beading detail, which is the part 3 video that concludes this assignment.